Automation is historically inevitable, and its underlying mechanics are indifferent to human sentiment. Steel made bronze obsolete. The internal combustion engine rendered steam power non-viable. The self-checkout systems at local grocery stores successfully made entire teams of retail workers obsolete. Capital assets consistently evolve to make human labor obsolete. It is a slow, quiet pressure entirely governed by classical supply and demand. For a typical physical asset, like apples, the consumer demand line slopes downward because lower prices drive higher purchasing intent, while the supply line slopes upward because higher market prices incentivize producers to scale their output. The intersection of these two paths dictates the natural market price where transactional trade occurs. What many workers fail to realize is that this exact transactional engine governs their employment, their salaries, and their long-term economic value. If you swap out physical commodities for white-collar professionals like accountants, the structural rules remain identical. A company pays for an accountant's output in the form of a salary. If the cost of employing an accountant drops to near zero, every enterprise seeks to hire them in mass quantities. Conversely, if market salaries skyrocket, universities fill their lecture halls with eager students looking to enter the trade, but corporations scale back their hiring because the capital outlay outweighs the organizational return. The point where these forces balance dictates modern employment statistics. The structural crisis begins when these supply and demand lines are artificially shifted by technology. When corporate entities discovered they could outsource financial, customer, or analytical work to digital hubs in developing nations, they effectively increased the global supply of labor. This allowed companies to secure the exact same volume of operational output for a fraction of the cost, serving as a primary driver of wage stagnation across wealthy economies. On the demand side, the transformation is even more severe. Historically, technology acted as an efficiency multiplier. A small team of accountants equipped with electronic calculators could match the output of a massive department relying on manual abacuses. Later, a pair of specialists leveraging spreadsheet software could outproduce a room full of calculator operators. As capital assets in the form of software improve, the volume of human labor required to complete a fixed organizational objective shrinks exponentially. An enterprise that once required 200 professionals suddenly functions seamlessly with 20. When technology transitions from an asset that assists a worker to a highly automated machine that operates independently, human labor is removed from the equation entirely. When every core industry matches this pattern, the global economy careens toward one of three possible macro outcomes: the good, the bad, or the ugly. The first path represents the classic futurist ideal. In this scenario, automated systems handle the baseline infrastructure of civilization, freeing human time entirely for intellectual, recreational, and creative pursuits. To sustain the population, the enterprises operating these hyper-efficient machines are heavily taxed, or the automated infrastructure is publicly owned on behalf of the citizenry. A robust universal basic income is distributed uniformly, replacing the traditional salaries that are no longer accessible through human labor. While a small upper middle class might persist by managing the remaining non-automated niches or investing their excess stipends back into the market, the baseline standard of living for the general population rises significantly due to the sheer material abundance produced by a machine workforce. However, even this idealized model contains deep systemic traps. In a society completely decoupled from traditional employment, historical constraints on population growth vanish. When careers, childcare costs, and time scarcity are no longer variables in a household's financial survival, birth rates naturally face upward pressure. Because humans remain consumers of finite material resources, requiring physical land, clean water, agricultural yields, and transport systems, limitless population growth places a hard cap on the sustainability of a basic income model. In a post-automation world where algorithms balance ledgers, manage real estate, and handle corporate operations, human labor shifts from a wealth-generating asset to a net resource drain on a finite planet. This realization leads directly to the second, more probable outcome. Here, a universal basic income structure exists, but it is strictly minimal, engineered merely to prevent civil unrest while covering bare biological survival. This structure splits society into two polarized classes: the elite cartel that owns the automated capital, and an underclass forced to compete for unstable gig-style tasks in the shrinking margins where machines cannot yet cost-effectively scale. Under this framework, population growth is aggressively disincentivized through economic penalties, turning the choice to raise a family into a luxury reserved exclusively for the asset-owning class. The wealthy live in heavily fortified, technologically insulated enclaves, mirroring modern urban areas defined by extreme wealth disparities, where the affluent enjoy immense luxury but are forced to exist inside modern fortresses to escape the underlying volatility of the surrounding population. The third and most severe scenario emerges in economies driven by the rigid philosophy that an individual's right to resource consumption is entirely tied to their marketplace utility. In this model, social safety nets are starved by pure economic forces. Transactional economics does not distribute resources to individuals whose time has been rendered economically worthless. While popular sociology often argues that businesses must maintain a prosperous consumer class to purchase their goods, pure economic history refutes this assumption. At the most fundamental level, corporate entities do not require a massive public consumer base to survive. They can trade exclusively with each other and their asset-owning peers, servicing the automated infrastructure and luxury demands of the capital-holding class. In this framework, populations missing a marketplace function face devastating structural abandonment, leading to rapid economic displacement, severe poverty, and sharp demographic declines. What early models failed to anticipate was not just the velocity of this technological shift, but the specific demographic it would target first. For decades, the threat of automation was assumed to be localized to manual, repetitive labor, the factory floor, the assembly line, and physical blue-collar trades. Instead, modern artificial intelligence bypassed the physical world entirely, striking directly at digital white-collar service sectors. The primary casualties are not mechanical plants, but the massive outsourced service economies that developing nations carefully constructed over the past 30 years as their primary path to wealth. Entire economic growth strategies in regions like the Philippines and Bangladesh were built around business process outsourcing, handling customer relations, data transcription, billing, and technical support. These roles were long considered insulated from automation because they demanded human language comprehension, localized context, and cognitive adaptability. Large language models, however, can now execute these exact processes instantaneously for less than the cost of a server's electricity. With international institutions estimating that up to nearly 90% of outsourced service roles in these emerging markets are highly vulnerable to immediate automation, the foundational ladder for developing nations to catch up with Western wealth is being systematically cut down. This data network effect creates a self-reinforcing monopoly. More data yields a superior model, which attracts more users, which in turn generates more data. We are witnessing a historical transformation where the long-term macroeconomic gains of technology are projected to expand global wealth, but the short-term disruption is deeply polarizing the workforce. When industrial automation and large-scale offshoring transformed Western manufacturing between 1980 and 2010, millions of secure middle-class jobs vanished from industrial centers, triggering multi-generational economic stagnation, lower life expectancies, and deep community fragmentation that these regions still struggle to reverse. The modern AI transition is following an identical structural blueprint, but it is operating at a scale that targets the mind rather than the muscle, compressing decades of labor evolution into a matter of years. The central economic question facing modern society is no longer whether technology will reshape the global marketplace, but whether human workers and institutional policy can adapt fast enough to survive the absolute capture of value by automated capital.